What's cracking, guys? Bruce Matson here, your host show of Metro Scout Fantasy Football, and I made a discovery just now, just thumbing through DLF's new ADP for April. I looked through it, and I wasn't really looking for this player, but it came out to me once I looked through all the wide receivers, and we did 6 mocks, 20 rounds apiece for startup drafts. This guy did not get drafted in one of them. Over 200 players, almost like 250 players in each draft, and more players than that when you put all 6 together. This guy was not one of those players. So I got curious. I went over to keeptradecut.com, looked him up. He's 251 overall. And I get it. It's not like he's this grandiose asset. He's really been a flop his whole career, but he went to a situation where he could flourish. And it's not that he's good, and it's not like he's anything that great or anything. It's the price. It's the price. Everybody's got a price. And free is something I always like to see. I always like to see free. This guy was a former second-round pick, 60th overall, and went to a decent situation. Things didn't work out. It was a crowded situation. And now he gets to rejuvenate his career, jumpstart it maybe. He's on a cheap 1-year deal, and he's with the Dallas Cowboys. And the thing is, this could happen. This could happen because we saw this happen. And the player I'm talking about is James Washington. And I get it. No one's thinking about James Washington, and I understand that. There's other videos here on YouTube where the content creators telling you to buy like Michael Thomas, Calvin Ridley, or DJ Moore, like the names everybody all knows. But I'm actually scouring, trying to get you something different here, trying to think a little bit, think outside the box here. I just saw this guy go undrafted in 6 rookie mock drafts. I saw Dak Prescott last year funnel in on Cedric Wilson, even though he had Amari Cooper, even though he had CeeDee Lamb, even though he had some running backs there he could lean on, and he funneled in on Cedric Wilson way too much, especially in some of those games. And Cedric Wilson had 5 double-digit PPR fantasy points last year. 5. He wasn't like a wide receiver 1 or anything like that, but I'm talking about a wide receiver here that you could put at the end of your bench that you can pick up off waivers right now in most of your leagues or trade for as a throw-in. Like, I'm not even saying make a deal for him. I'm saying, like, if you're making a trade, dude has him on his team, say, hey, can you throw in James Washington? There's a chance he doesn't even make it on this Cowboys roster. It's like a cheap $1 million something deal. But thinking outside the box here, if he becomes the wide receiver 3 for this team, then we may have a guy that could get funneled some targets in some games, and he's your wide receiver 7 on your Dynasty roster you got for free. Maybe you could flip him for a pick. Maybe you can use him in some spot starts, and then once he's done, you drop him. Free is free. And you got to take advantage of these free assets here that you can get when you're scavenging the waiver wire, or if you're making trades, you see somebody like this on the other manager's roster, and you're like, hey, throw him in. Can you throw him in on the deal? Can I get him off your roster? It'll allow you to pick somebody up off waivers. You'll be surprised how many times that'll happen. Just asking for that throw and asking for that jabroni wide receiver to come on you. And James Washington, yes, he's a jabroni wide receiver. He does have some goods in his game, or some goods in his profile per se. Won the Biletnikoff, productive at the collegiate level, gets downfield, didn't work out at Pittsburgh. Maybe he can rejuvenate his career, maybe not, but this is a speculative asset that's free. And I like free because there's no loss here. If he doesn't hit or if he doesn't give you anything, you just waste a little bit of time, maybe a roster spot for a couple weeks, couple months. It is what it is, but you're not really out on anything. You're not out on capital. You can build off this. You can build from this if nothing happens out of James Washington. You're not dead. Your team's not destroyed or anything like that. Another thing you got to think about is Dallas might draft a wide receiver, and even if they do, it doesn't mean he's dead either. It could be like week 5, week 6, week 7, and you know attrition happens, and he becomes the de facto wide receiver 3. starts getting targets. The competition here is pretty slim for him outside Lamb and Gallup. Gallup's coming back from knee injury that we got to think about at least. But Noah Brown, TJ Vasher, Sima Fukuko, and Brandon Smith. That's the competition right now. I think they're probably going to bring in a wide receiver through the draft. That does not mean it's going to happen in the first round. This could be later. This could be in the middle rounds. This could be second rounds. Dallas has a lot of holes to fill. So wide receiver may not be their main thing. And the reason why I kind of think this is they paid a big pick for CeeDee Lamb. They paid to get Michael Gallup. They brought in James Washington. I made this pick on CeeDee Lamb, and I put this money up on Gallup. I want to see what you guys can do. I paid all this money for Dak Prescott. You should be able to work with these weapons. I'll get you a third-round wide receiver. I'll get you a second-round wide receiver, a fourth-round wide receiver. We'll get some talent mixed in here, but I don't feel like I have to get you a first-round wide receiver when I have all these other needs. I feel like we're good to go here, and that might be how they're feeling. They got a lot of holes to fill. They may bring in another veteran later. It's hard to tell. It's very ambiguous with this team. They may trade back to acquire more picks to get more talent on the team for cheap. Those rookie contracts really help on the long term since they got guys like Zeke on beefed up contracts. So there's a lot of directions this team could go. James Washington, week 1, could be the wide receiver 3 on this team. Could be a target that in some situations, in some games, Dak locks in on. And he's sitting there as your wide receiver 7, wide receiver 8, wide receiver 9, depending on how deep your league is, and as a free asset. And he gives you a little tiny return on the investment, give you an extra wide receiver you can put in your flex. Some of us are starting 4, 5, 6 wide receivers on some of our Dynasty leagues. I'm in some crazy Dynasty leagues where I need a guy like this, where everything's thin anyways on the waiver wire. My rosters is deep, and I could always use another random wide receiver who has something in their game, something in their situation that I can lean on. James Washington will probably not hit, but he's in a situation in Dallas that if everything goes right, he could be a surprise for us. And at the cost of free, at the cost of just a couple clicks of your mouse, getting him off the waiver wire, there's no loss here. And that's all I'm saying. James Washington is a guy I'm looking at, and if I can fit him on some teams, I will. If I need to drop him, I will. And that's all I'm saying. Just think outside the box. Look at your waivers. Look for guys like this. Look for wide receivers. And look at the storyline of how they could emerge throughout the year. Maybe even for like a 3 or 4 week span. You can use them and just set them back on the waivers or whatever. Also, you don't have to pick them up now. Maybe pick them up in August. Maybe pick them up in September. Maybe pick them up in October once things start churning around in the game a little bit more. Just be open. Just be on the lookout. This is another way you can be active with your Dynasty fantasy football teams. You know, I always like talking philosophy on this channel. I like chopping it up, giving you guys ideas of how to build your teams, how to flip things around. If you have like a wide receiver 8, wide receiver 7, 9, whatever, wide receiver 10 on your team, like you're 10 deep or whatever, and you could flip one of them for a 4th or 3rd round pick and then pick up James Washington off waivers if he's there. I imagine he's picked up in some leagues. He had to once he signed with Dallas, but maybe not. That's something you may want to think of, especially if you think you can get like 80% of that wide receiver's production. You gain a pick, you gain a little capital, and you pick up another wide receiver who's a speculative asset, just like the other one who was a speculative asset. And now you're gaining capital and you're pushing for the future. Those back-end wide receivers, those back-end running backs who are speculative, who more than likely won't do anything for you, and there's another one on waivers that can pretty much give you the same thing. Why not flip that running back 7 on your team, that wide receiver 8 on your team, get a 4th rounder, 3rd rounder in 2023, allow you to move up in the draft next year to get the running back you want, the wide receiver you want, give you more flexibility, give you more value, and then you still get the same player, same level of talent, same level of situation off the waiver wire. It's kind of a no-lose situation, but that's something you got to come over with your fantasy teams, with your waiver wire, with your league, and see what happens. And then with him being a throw-in in trades, that's something I always want to look into. If I'm already dealing with the dude, we're talking trades, we already have things lined up. James Washington's there. He is free. I know he's free. He just went undrafted in 6 startup mock drafts. Get him in if you can fit him on your roster. Ask him to add him on the deal. Say, hey, it'll give you more flexibility to pick up guys up off waivers. It'll give you more flexibility for your draft picks. You can fit them all on your roster. See if that can happen. See if you can get a free player. He's a free guy right now, a free asset who has a storyline to his season that could potentially help you out somewhere down the line when it comes to you setting lineups. And that's all I'm saying. I could be here pumping up like a Michael Thomas. I could be here pumping up an A.J. Dillon, but we all already know that. Let's talk about some guys we can pick up off waivers. Let's talk about the nitty-gritty of Dynasty. Let's get into the hard stuff. We all know about these top-tier players. We all know about these top-tier speculative assets. Let's dig a little deep here. Let's try and find some intrinsic value here off waivers, and let's talk how we can work that into our game here, how we can strengthen our team without even having to spend any draft capital. James Washington is one of those players you can do that with. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your ideas on this. I'm just trying to think outside the box to help you guys out. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on the way out. Every subscription matters. It fuels me to keep pumping out this content, helping you with your Dynasty fantasy football teams and everything else. Again, I want to thank you, and I'll catch you next time.